because it's not going to happen sitting in my dorm room just building apps all day. I think that's like a misnomer a lot of technical people that go into school have is like,
It's interesting. As a parallel, I applied to 21 different colleges, and I didn't want to go to college in the first place. I just wanted to be an entrepreneur. But when I arrived in Atlanta in the late 90s, the entrepreneurial ecosystem at tech was marginal at best. They still have ATDC, and at the time they just kept on bragging about Earthlink all day and night for I think like a solid decade that was their great success. Um, and so I was a little bit jaded with the community at the time. And you've had some incredible entrepreneurs who've given back to the community, like Chris Klaus, who's a little bit older than I was with CreateX, and they had Flashpoint. They have a bunch of different programs. So the entrepreneurial community started to develop, I feel like, in the 2000s and has continued to evolve. But when you're coming into school wanting to be an entrepreneur, very similar. All I want to do is find co-founders, and I knocked on every single dorm room and Smith fourth floor on the east side of campus, and really didn't find a lot of entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. Most of the people wanted to have a career, do a job, finish their degree, and do co-op programs, which I think was really, really good. But it's a very disconnect culturally from wanting to be an entrepreneur. So how was the experience for you trying to find other co-founders, and how was the ecosystem at the time? Because what was about 2010, give or take?
that's right. I went to Georgia Tech in 2012. Honestly, very similar, JP. Like it was an interesting point. So we came in and immediately, obviously, like-minded people find like-minded people. So all the people that were building apps and wanted to be entrepreneurs, found each other and started doing hackathons and things like that. I actually distinctly remember this conversation. So my close friend, one of my best friends to this day, Chintan Parikh, who also went to Georgia Tech, is actually the founder of an org called Startup Exchange, which partners with CreateX and all these large organizations. Now the largest entrepreneur chapter or organization nationally. They have chapters at Stanford, at Georgia Tech, et cetera, et cetera. And he wrote a Hacker News. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Hacker News and Y Combinator. He wrote a post at that time about why the entrepreneur ecosystem in Atlanta sucks or something. Some kind of like inflammatory headline like that. It got to #1 basically on Hacker News, went viral, and he got absolutely flamed on it because a lot of the guys that had, I think, spent the last 10, 15 years investing into the Atlanta ecosystem took that a bit personally. So it was definitely better. I think there was a lot more foundation than you probably had when you went to school. I think there were some of these programs. So ATV, Atlanta Tech Village, down the street here was coming up around that time. ATDC was always there. Chris Klaus was obviously involved. Paul Judge, Alan Nance had started, some Tech Square Labs and some surrounding kind of ventures. So like there wasn't a clear path. I think some of my peers were starting those organizations in Startup Exchange, in HackGT is one of the largest student-run hackathons, in the nation now. That was my roommate as well that started that program. So frankly, a lot of my peers took it upon themselves to try to create those communities at Georgia Tech, and that was great. That's how I met Chintan. That's how I met some of the people that work at PrizePicks today that we ended up recruiting. And I mean, it's come so far since then. I think like it's the best it's ever been, obviously, in Atlanta now. There's so many different pockets. I think Atlanta Tech Village has expanded to downtown. And honestly, like that put a bit of a chip on our shoulder as that generation that was coming in to say, like, how do we put Atlanta on the map in terms of building a tech hub, being recognized as one of the largest, talent dense kind of cities in the United States. And there's real talent here and community here, et cetera. So it got a lot better. I think I spent an incredible amount of time in Atlanta Tech Village during college, even after college. And frankly, I kind of took it up on myself, JP. Like I was extremely shy coming into college. You couldn't get me on the stage and talking to you guys. One of the shyest people you'd ever met. And like, it was a real personal challenge and growth story for me to figure out, like, how do I take my hands out of my pockets and go meet people to go find, the right expert, the right person I can partner with to go down this path. Cause it's not going to happen sitting in my dorm room, just building apps all day. I think that's like a misnomer a lot of technical people that go into school have is like, the social network story. We're gonna hack in our dorm room and go viral. Like that happens, but the real business, or at least from my experience, like meeting people, shaking hands, getting that mentorship in person, getting that exposure, just working at a company and sitting, next to marketing, sitting next to legal, whatever it is. Like those are the most valuable things I've gotten out of those experiences. So I think direct answer to your question, like there was a better foundation for the startup ecosystem and entrepreneurship kind of community in Atlanta. But frankly, I saw a lot of my peers drive that, from 2012 to now.
So when I went to Tech, Tech was ranked #1 most miserable college in the United States for 10 years. And I know they've done a lot better job since then. But, one, wanting to come in as an entrepreneur, both yourself and myself, the computer science, so I studied computer science and then studied biomedical engineering after. It was a miserable experience. It was very difficult. The worst exams were all open book exams. And I think there was a disconnect between the entrepreneurial computer science and software development. They didn't have app development at the time, versus what was being taught in school. So I had a miserable experience. I think I've taken a few things from it, but I knew why I was at Tech. I wanted to find entrepreneurs, I wanted to find co-founders, and I wanted to build business. But I feel like my experience, one, I didn't want to be a software developer. And I thought the program was miserable for me. And I think it's been a great fit for a lot of other people. You coming in wanting entrepreneurial ambitions and connecting with stuff, how was your experience from the computer science department? Because, and before you answer that, the CS department at Tech is from my understanding, the only program in the entire world that was below 20th that has now cracked top 5 in the entire world, which is a pretty extraordinary feat for any school to do that. And it's very, very rare to see that kind of trajectory within less than 25 years. But walk us through kind of your experience. Did you take anything from the thing? Was it as miserable as it was back, decades ago like I had? Tell us kind of how your experience was.
Um, yeah, I had a very similar ambition, is what I remember, JP, as well, which is like I didn't want to get boxed into being a programmer. I was very, again, influence came from my dad and just the experiences having those internships in high school into college. Like it was something about it, just like I don't want to be the guy that's always just going to write the code or the features for the business. I actually want to drive strategy and want to be involved in some of the other discussions. I got that impression, just being transparent, out of some of the college of computing even when I was there, and that's because the curriculum is really hard. Honestly, I've some of the best engineers I've met come out of Georgia Tech because they're trained very well on the fundamentals. The one thing I always kind of had a gripe with was it was very outdated curriculum. Like we were learning Java and Python, and Python is fine, but Java specifically, and some of these, we're writing programs in very archaic languages in 2012, 2013, and like years behind industry, right? Like there was nothing happening in app development at that time. And just practical like web development, et cetera, skills that you need as you enter kind of the workforce. That was always one thing that I kind of had a gripe with. So I think the answer to your questions, like it was a strong curriculum, it was hard. The one thing I really had a tough time with is like, especially my time during Georgia Tech, I'm not sure if this still exists. The professors became very obsessed with like making 10 or 20% of your grade coming from just attending class. So if you didn't go to class, you were automatically at a disadvantage, which was the story of my life.
Sounds familiar.
So that really kind of rubbed me the wrong way about just like it seemed driven by a little bit more by like vanity, other than like, hey, if we can master the concepts outside of class and come do well in school or in the exams, I don't understand why there's so much like strictness around this sort of thing. So frankly, like I didn't have a great time at Georgia Tech from like a grades perspective, just because I was spending the majority of my time at Atlanta Tech Village, at hackathons, building side projects, really trying to just drive the initiative forward of how do I figure out how to start a business or get involved with the early stage company. I was always pretty practical about like, I don't have real domain expertise or like knowledge of, business or industry in general to go start something ground up. We had tried that a couple times and failed because we were just building in our dorm rooms. We hadn't had conversations and do customer discovery or figure out what the real pain points that somebody would be willing to pay for are. So like those are all lessons that we got early on. But yeah, curriculum was hard and it discouraged me from kind of going to class and like paying attention in school and trying to do well, frankly, on some of that stuff. I have some regrets about that stuff. There's really good knowledge that was taught in some of those classes that I wish I had, mastered or paid a little bit more attention to. But I think you can always go back and kind of glean some of those insights. And ultimately, like, I ended up dropping out and coming back to school 2 or 3 times because I was trying different things. So I was very like-minded, I think, just trying to figure out how to make it happen.